this year that I haven't put it upon per se.
The health district to order. And we begun at 10:01. And then, do we approve the agenda?
Director Stanton,
Aye.
Director DeVito.
Aye.
Thank you.
Public comments.
Public comment.
We have no public, we have no one else on Zoom, and we received nothing via email. So we're going to say there are no public.
So,
Put your glasses on so you can see it coming.
all right. So when we do the review of the financial statements, tell me how we do that.
So this month is a little unusual because we have 2 months to catch up on. We have November's and December's.
And why was that? Did we?
It's because we
have
didn't do
December?
we didn't do a January meeting
Oh.
because it's right at the start of the new year.
Because it was New Year's Day.
I think it was New Year's Day, right? So historically, the past treasurer would usually look at November and say, okay, we don't really need to run through the reports because in some respect, they're already repeated in the December report.
Yeah.
Difference is check detail report or the credit card statements, something of that sort where you're seeing just those monthly expenditures.
Yeah.
I have nothing of note that were unique to that month.
Yeah.
But that would be up to you.
To that November month.
To November. So typically, treasurer would say, okay, there's nothing there, or we would discuss 1 or 2 items. And then we would jump into the most current month, which is, of course, the December financials.
So having not actually looked in detail of the agenda, I made copious notes on November. And then I got through it and I said, oh crap, there's December. And so made a few notes on that. But
Alright,
I'll be happy to tell you what my questions were for November.
perfect.
Lots of notes.
Oh, lots of notes.
This is November. This is December, not so many.
Perfect.
All right. So on our P&L for November.
Report 1, 2, I would assume 2 or 3. So the P&L for just the month of November?
Yeah, let me, yes.
Okay,
No, it's year to date. So we made a bunch of money in terms of interest and dividends, right?
from the investment income?
It says interest and
Yes,
dividends, 148,902.
yes. So our July
Lots
to
of
November, yes, the market was
Yeah.
kind
Kind
to us.
yeah. So that's less of a question, more of a comment,
Yes.
and that's nice. And then total other expense was a negative 317,437. And that's also good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a reimbursement. So we have the expense, but we end up reimbursing the operating account for that.
I see.
So it's, I mean, unless you have a better explanation.
The expenses are up in the body,
Right,
and so we get reimbursed for some of those from the community.
development disbursements, right.
So we have to put it somewhere, and so it's other income.
Yeah. Okay, so it's in addition to total other expenses, it's other stuff too.
It's pretty much just a wash between a lot of those construction costs that you'll see up in the expenses under either admin or wellness center. Generally, it's
Right.
wellness center for development, but in this case.
Or on the balance sheet.
Or on the balance sheet, right? It's a way to acknowledge the fact that we spent money, but then we went back into our investments, pulled that money to reimburse us.
And that's part of that 317. So Susan, you said we pulled it from something and put it into operating. So what was that?
Community, the development disbursement on the equity section of the balance sheet is where that is.
All right. So say that one more time for me, please.
Equity has unrestricted and it has community development disbursement. So we can use the community development disbursement to reimburse operations for the wellness center.
And as I recall, thank you for that. And as I recall, in December, there was a whole bunch of that transfer. So now I understand what that is.
Right, right. In the December financials, you'll see that we ask for a reimbursement amount. This is how that comes from that.
And it's
Alright.
not all, when we get back,
Yeah,
it's not all wellness center.
right. So report 9 is the community development disbursement. And that is for development of the properties. While most of it is the community health and wellness center, it is also this building. So for example, when you painted this building, it's a facility upgrade, not just a regular maintenance, because there were still things this building was supposed to have had done. Sometimes those are in there. We're getting to the point where there'll be less of that for this building because we're almost at caught up, other than what will come forward from Sedgwick. Does that make sense?
Tell you what, why don't we, for at least the first several months, do that half-hour thing before the
Sure.
meeting?
So for the next few months, we'll run a pre-meeting and meet with you in advance to kind of run over some of these details and educations. Sally, you're welcome to come to that if you want, but you're not required.
Great. All right, now I'm budget versus actual from
Report.
July through November.
Yes.
So,
And there's two things that we call report 3. So there's 2 budget versus actual. 2 years ago, I think we broke it out so that you could look at admin versus budget versus wellness center versus budget, because they're now separate line items. The challenge there is the fact that there isn't a separate income line item. So when
sorry
you
about
get,
that, Teresa.
we're working on it. We'll get there.
We
To some
could
extent.
allocate.
We have tried.
Take a look
We have
at, take a look at the expense, add 10%, right?
There's formulas to be information.
Let's look at the expenses.
So property tax was up 123,000 for that 6 months.
And that mostly means November.
Yeah.
A little bit of October, but mostly November.
Okay, so we get property tax once or twice a year.
Twice a year, so you get from the December taxes and the April taxes. Typically, those start rolling into the county and get dispersed, starting in October. November's a big hit, December's a big hit, January's usually a pretty good hit. And then you get a little bit of a bump again, March, April's a big hit, and then again in May. So you see this little bell curve around each of those property tax disbursements.
All right, so is it meaningful at all to say that we've got 123,000 more than we thought we'd get? Because
So there's a little bit of meaningfulness around it in that we'll find out probably come the actual February financials, either how much I was overly conservative in how much I budgeted, or if it evens out a little bit over the next couple months.
Okay.
You'll usually find that when I'm budgeting, I am much more conservative in that. We've looked at some historicals to identify what's the rate of growth typically. But things happen that can affect property tax. It's usually not immediate. For example, let's go back to the year of COVID. So 2020, COVID really shut things down in March. You didn't see anything change with the April property taxes. And we never actually saw a challenge in the December property taxes, because by then you had, all of the COVID dollars and things. So we never really saw a dip. But I still conservatively budget the expected income
So just from memory, what do we expect by June 30th for property tax income? And I'm just,
Yeah,
give me a guess,
I
please.
think that I budgeted 2.3,
2.3 to 2.5 is where I remember the ballpark. figure
somewhere
was.
in that, that amount is what the total budgeted amount
Yeah.
was.
So that's grown a bunch.
It's grown significantly since I started in 2019 when we were just barely below the $2 million mark. But obviously, we've seen tremendous growth around here through all the new properties, and you're seeing lots of changes in properties, and hence they get reevaluated for property taxes and so on and so forth.
Good news.
Oh, for
All
us.
right. Yep.
I mean, for us to be able to serve the community better.
That's right. Glad you clarified that.
You're welcome.
All right, so ambulances, you got that, there, got education conferences, I didn't. What we thought we were,
Yeah,
probably will, right?
we will. Yeah, I mean, we actually, for education and conferences on report 3, we actually spent above what I budgeted. So I budgeted 13,000, we spent 19, so we're actually $6,000 over that budget line item. That is going to be a fairly consistent up and down because the conferences happen at different times, billings occur, and then we also had a couple of employees take advantage of the tuition reimbursement and or student loan reimbursement.
It's good.
And that's where that is being booked,
Correct. No, yes.
employee benefits?
Your student loan goes under education.
Student loan is under education.
It's under education.
Then is that also like the CSDA?
CSDA conferences, ACHD conferences, certification trainings, anything we pay for education for any of the staff or any of the conference materials that board members go to as well. So remember, when you're looking at the expenses.
Yeah.
When you look at the third column that says over budget.
Yeah.
When it's red up in income, that means we actually didn't get what I budgeted. When it's red in the expenses, it usually means that I've spent more than I budgeted.
We have talked a bit about legal expense and that we have not been invoiced for 6 or 7 months. So how are we dealing with that?
Well, I anticipate that will probably get caught up
Yeah.
in the next few months. And then you can anticipate that our legal fees will be in excess of what was budgeted this year with the changes that we're making there.
Gotcha. So we budgeted for year-to-date 7,500 for legal, right?
For year to date, yes.
And so the red $2,002 means
We actually, I think, had to finally pay last year's invoice, I think in July,
Yes.
we finally got it. So it showed a negative because the billing came in so late and several
Yeah.
months.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm, next fiscal year, our legal accounting will be straight up across the line, not a challenge.
Right. So the next one I'm looking at is board stipends. What do we need to do to get that up?
Well, really, that depends if every single one of you were at all 6 of your allowed various meetings per month,
We'd be there.
then you'd be there. So I'm actually happy that you all aren't because you don't all go to 6 meetings, it just isn't always relevant. If you're all going to 6 meetings, it usually means that there's some particular challenge within the district that's requiring extra special meetings or something of that sort. So staying under that budgeted amount is actually good.
That's what I thought, but Sally and I will encourage us to come to more things,
Well, yes, and
regardless of the spec.
regardless, because it is your civic duty.
That's right. So our employee benefits are way under. For all of our employees here, what should we be doing?
We don't really need to do anything. That is built in the event. For example, let's say we have an employee that doesn't take advantage of certain health benefit because they have it through somewhere else. And let's say, unfortunately, during the middle of the year, they have a change in status and suddenly they need district benefit. I budget everyone at the expected rate as if they were going to, so that again, we're covered in the event that there's a change.
Good.
So I'm happy that that comes under because it means there hasn't been balances in other slides.
Good. So I'm moving to the wellness center,
Okay.
Teresa. And
Dun, dun, dun.
yeah, that's right. So I'm looking at health services and clinics. Go find that again.
The actual expense was 50,000, I budgeted 73.
Yeah.
And Teresa and I can speak on this together. When we were putting together budget, there were programs that we thought might come online that we might have to pay for.
Okay.
Those haven't come to fruition yet, and or Teresa found county programming that was free to us.
Ooh, yeah.
So that is again, one of those, benefits that really lands in her win category.
That's serendipitous. That's good news.
Like this, like the diabetes self-management classes that the county came up and taught, instead of us having to pay a particular entity to run them for us.
Education and conferences was a bit under.
Because the board expenses stay under admin, where staff goes under wellness center. So it's just for the 4 staff out of the wellness center,
Okay.
whereas admin includes board.
And then office expense was way under. Right? Yep. Do you think we'll catch up?
Hard to know.
Yeah.
A lot of times it has more to do with they're using certain things, and suddenly Teresa comes in and goes, I need all new training tables. And then I say no, and then we negotiate, and then she gets new training. My first answer is always no, or can it be $1?
Yeah.
And then Judith and Teresa come forward with a, Rachel, you're being unreasonable. This is what we need to buy.
You probably have to do that a lot, don't you?
Yeah, it's $1 and then it's $500 and then somewhere in the middle.
It's very Goldilocks between us. Too cold, too hot, just right.
Sally, do you have any questions for our stellar staff here?
No questions right now, just
Absorbing it all.
Right. Okay. So, oh wait, I do have a second page.
Okay.
So this is December now.
Oh, we're in December. Okay. And then for Sally's point, again, I will point to the fact that the reports look different. Again, this goes back to Marnie, who is our contract bookkeeper, has certain software that allows for a deeper narrative and some additional information to be collected, analyzed, and put forward in a report that has a lot more information for someone who may be less financially savvy in reading financials, but it's also much more transparent to the community. So we've been looking at this process for several months to identify what makes the most sense. So we wanted to bring forward this new format for your consideration. It's not a done deal, but I would hope that you would like it. The nice part is that, besides the fact that it looks pretty, when you get to the first page, which is essentially what would be the new treasurer's report, it gives a summary for the first two, like balance sheet, the profit and loss, and then report 3 summaries.
Yeah, I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it's really helpful because it'll catch and point out some differences. Same thing for report 9. It won't talk about report 4, 5, and 6, which is the investment reports. That's on the second page of that report, the compliance report summary that usually Susan puts together with Marnie that talks about the investments. It doesn't usually talk about report 7, which is our check detail report, because that is just a statement of what was spent. Usually board members will take a look at that and say, hey, why is there a $12,000 check to Rachel Mason? Okay, first of all, there isn't, let's be clear. But if there was, this is the opportunity for the board to be able to say, is this a new vendor? Or this seems to be an unusual expense, explain it, right? That way nothing is buried within a financial.
Excuse me.
Your pen is trying to escape.
No.
So, that said, report 9, or, December, whatever we're in.
Okay. So I'm looking at December year-to-date, budget for administrative.
For report 3, okay?
And again, just a comment, it shows a bunch of property tax revenue that we didn't necessarily expect may change.
Mhm.
I'm curious, I've never seen in a P&L a column called remaining.
And so if you go to page 8,
I might have expected,
it is one of the columns that gets auto-generated, and it's basically, how much is left in the overall budget.
yeah. And typically we would call that something else.
Typically,
We don't typically have that on there because you'll notice that the values are essentially the same as in what's over budget. If
Right,
you go down the columns, it's
Yeah.
not really a helpful column.
right.
It's just, I think it's auto-generated.
All right. Well, as long as we know what that is, and I don't know to what degree things can be altered. And just delete that.
Mhm.
I'm sure we can get Marnie to probably pull that out of the,
Yeah, unless it's helpful to anybody, but I don't think so.
no, again,
So
it's
it's just
redundant.
oversight.
Yeah.
We looked at it so many times for other things, and I don't think we saw that.
Right.
So other things, legal stipends, benefits, all those things we talked about in November.
Yep.
And in the wellness center, essentially, it's the same as well. So that is the extent of my questions.
Easy.
Now what?
So the only other thing that we would point out, if you go to December's report 9, which I believe is actually the last page of that packet. That's the one we call it community development disbursements. And that will show all the quarterly expenses
Right?
from that account.
Yeah.
And again, this is the time where at the end of that quarter, the team comes back to finance and asks for the reimbursement amount from the late investment account to replace the expenditures, what we paid out of the operating account, right? So these are typically not budgeted items because they're part of that development plan for wellness center, and then a small amount for the admin building. So this is different from basic maintenance expenses, right?
So
So you'll
is
see,
this just a paper thing?
it's a balancing, so it's a paper balancing. So typically what we do, and because LAIF only allows us to roll out a certain even amount. So even though we spent in the last quarter $318,519.07, we can't ask for that exact amount to reimburse the checking account. So what we have to do is round that to an even number. And then Susan is able to acknowledge on the balance sheet the overs or unders of that difference. So what the team asks for is that the finance committee will make the recommendation to transfer $319,000 from the LAIF investment account back to the operating account, so that that reimbursement rebalances us.
Okay, so,
For these
so where do we get the
expenses.
money before the transfer?
So we've already spent that money out of
Right.
our checking account,
And
out of
Operations.
operations, yes, so.
so we had a bunch more in operations than we needed, but
Or
yeah,
come July, August, and sometimes September, when we don't receive property taxes, we will do a funds transfer from the 5-star account, which is a separate holding account for funds, so that cash flow doesn't get impeded. And that way we're not constantly going in and out of investment accounts. This way investment accounts are orderly. At the end of this fiscal year, if our operating account ends up with excess, then we would come back to finance and say, we believe that we can transfer X amount of this dollars back into an investment account, if that was the case. But then we will always, throughout the course of this year, rebalance the funds, the cash flow funds, if you will, that's in 5-star, where our regular operating account is through Bank of California.
so next time we meet, we'll be looking at January's and year-to-date. Will this not show up?
You'll still have the report, but we will not ask for a reimbursement. We only do that on a quarterly basis.
So in April, we'll look at March. And that will.
Right.
All right.
Does that make?
Well, I'm not sure if it makes sense, but I do understand.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So just as a reminder, the district has 3 investment accounts. 3 investment vehicles. We have LAIF, we have Cal Trust, then we have California Class. Within Cal Trust, there are 2 separate accounts. There's a medium-term fund, which has been less yield to it, right? Those are longer-term investments. Last year, we created the liquidity fund because the unique investment market had better returns on those shorter term investments, right? You saw lots of growth. That's why you saw a lot of growth coming out of California Class, and then that liquidity fund, where LAIF and Cal Trust are your low risk, very steady eddy, but you're not going to get a lot of funds out of it. So the district in the last 2 years has taken more of a stance of let's have a more balanced approach to our investments so that we can capture some of that growth from the market so that eventually we can put it back into district resources and programming. Again, the goal has been from before I got here that the district in these developments of the wellness center would pull those funds from the LAIF account first. That has always just been our policy and practice. At some point, probably in the next year, we will need to discuss whether or not we want to continue to try to pull out of LAIF because we will eventually deplete that investment fund, which was created specifically from the sale of the hospital. Those funds were essentially kind of put into some of those investment vehicles. so that we would have them for the redevelopment of the loans. This report is how we track how those funds and investments for them over the long term. Is that a fair, make sure I have it misquoted, stated?
Does the district have like a financial advisor?
No.
Either, okay.
That has been another, question. Two different treasurers have had different ideas as to whether we should or not. Initially, when I first got here, there was an expectation that we would spend down this investment account very quickly because there was a expectation that we would very quickly renovate the wellness center. We had some change in leadership. Board stepped away from that expedited plan. And so we said, all right, well, since we're not going to spend that money as quickly, we need to make sure we're capturing this market. Those are decisions that have happened among the team here. I will likely come back within this next year as markets in theory stabilize. Yeah, things are again changing back down. That is beyond, I think, the expertise of this team. There are several financial advisors that work specifically within the municipal sphere that we have met and talked with from CSDA and such. I think this might be the year that we finance maybe has a strategy that says we're not going to spend down all this investment money because we want to keep strategic reserves, whatever. It might be smart to have that investment advisor who works for us to make sure that we are balancing and in the right account types or vehicles for the district or the market. To make sure that we're keeping up with the market from an expert standpoint. It is not uncommon, meaning it is common for special districts and especially cities and counties and such to have a financial advisor in that investment sphere. We were always smaller. We didn't have the problem of excess funds. We've managed things differently. We have different priorities now. So I think it might be prudent for us to plan that.
Okay, then what else do we talk about?
So if we go back to the agenda, shoot back to that one. So I guess first question, because our discussion item on the agenda is review of new financial report format.
Yeah.
As the finance team and the treasurer, do you like this new report and would you like to continue with this format?
I like it. I need to continue.
I second that. Are there any negatives to having that report?
I found none. We worked through several drafts with Marnie to make sure that we had all the language correct. We have the opportunity to look and or amend something if necessary from the narrative standpoint. So if the programming comes out and spits out something that doesn't make sense, we can change the narrative to make sure it is clear. But I like the format. I think it's cleaner and it's much less likely to yield errors if reports are changed from financials and Raquel's and they're pulling, 9 different separate files. What's nice is that this automatically will pull all the corrected ones.
Yeah. That's slick.
And they're pulled from our QuickBooks, so it's not some randomly created document.
Yeah.
So we will recommend to the board.
Well, and you don't actually even need to. This is just, it can stay within finance and we'll just move it forward.
Great.
Okay.
All right, good news.
Yay.
So item B is update Bank of California signs to include Sally and Judith for access to the account.
Yes, and the reason this is on here is it's always important to have our finance team actually be able to sign the checks because Sally is now on the finance team. We'd like to be able to have her be a check signer. And then because of the online process through the banks, in order for Judith to be able to go into her bank account to see if a check has cleared, she has to have a signing authority essentially. So it means we have to put her on the account. In order to put anyone on the account, we have to do all new signers, meaning even though I'm on the account already and you're already on the account, we have to have all new signature cards again.
Did I already do that or?
You signed for the investment accounts. This is the bank account.
Okay.
And whenever you're making a change to bank account signatories, we have to have minutes that demonstrate that this was approved by the team. And then this will go to the February board meeting. As long as the board approves the minutes from that, then tacit agreement to this, and then Raquel can go to the bank, get the new signature forms, and chase everybody down for signatures.
Okay, so
Exactly.
Finance Committee recommends that we do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we'll work forward on that, and that should, again, from an efficiency standpoint, that really makes it a lot easier. What happens is right now, if there's a question, if a vendor's been paid or a check is cleared or something of that, Judith has to wait for me to come in, have time, log into the account, find the transactions, and then let her know if it's happened. That may be a day, 2 days. I'm in Fiji again, which I won't be unfortunately.
Super efficient.
Yeah, super efficient. She doesn't, through our own practice and resolutions, Judith does not have signing authority on the account. So you don't have to worry about her going rogue and signing things because the bank would be like, hey, you can't sign a $10,000 check to yourself. You need 2 signatures. And what the heck are you doing over there? They would call us. In theory.
You're not really putting their mind at ease with that.
Well, the Bank of California is getting better, but their transition from being Pacific Western Bank to Bank of California has been
Difficult.
thank you.
But they do have a lot of user-friendly things in there. This is just the piece that I need in order to get to all of those pieces, those last little pieces to tie it all together that we've been looking for. We just need to be able to get in there to download some of those pieces. So,
Right,
Good.
especially when it's audit season.
yeah,
And audit says, can I see a copy of the check?
it'll make it much more efficient.
Okay, so C, and speaking of being efficient, we've already talked about that
Yeah.
exhaustively.
Yes, we have.
And so,
And so just a side note, that transfer from LAIF to the operating account, typically what happens next is Raquel will coordinate with one of you that is on the LAIF account now and have you come into the office. We typically make a phone call to make that transfer. Note that I can do that on my own, but we typically, because it's such a large amount, usually have a board member do it. Again, that creates that firewall, if you will, of an internal control, so that it doesn't look like your CEO has,
No question on that.
Yes.
Does this still go to the board and then that transfer occurs after board
it
approval?
still has to happen after the board approval.
Okay,
So it has to happen
So it's-
after the February board meeting.
so from here to board, after board,
Correct,
then the transfer occurs.
correct.
Okay.
so the 13th.
That's why you
or-
can't just run up there afterwards.
All right, Sally, would you like to recommend that we do C?
Do C?
Do C.
I move that we move do C.
So the
Reimbursement
recommendation is
of
to move the $319,000 from LAIF back into the operating account for reimbursement from CDD.
So this sounds silly, this I move and all that. How's that done in the past?
You don't actually need to make a formal motion because this is more committee level. At the board, the full board votes on it. But usually as long as you're agreeing that you're making a recommendation, the two of you nod, we make note, it's approved.
And I also approve.
And we don't have to do a roll call because there's two of you and we already know you just said yes.
Okay, so 5, board member comments and future agenda item. We've already got one of those comments, and that we're gonna meet again on March 5th on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Before you got here, I asked whether this 10 o'clock works, and it was said that you've already been asked about that, and you said yes. Works for me, works for the group, so. We'll
I think for the time being, you know, I mean, today, I mean, honestly, like every day is just a little bit, you know, like, let's see what happens. And I just happened to have a new patient this morning, so, that I felt compelled to go, not wait until after the meeting to
Sure.
date. Usually, Wednesdays I'm in the Fallbrook area. It's not an issue to kind of jiggle my schedule around it. Shouldn't be a problem.
Well, congratulations all on a great looking finance. More revenue, less expense.
Win-win.
Good job. Yeah.
We're keeping our expenditures appropriate and within budget. There are always line items that will be flexed throughout the year. And then there are always opportunities that come up during the course of the year. Usually as those expenses, which are maybe unbudgeted or unusual, I will usually bring them to this committee first. Depending on the nature of the expense, I may go to the board chair first, and then if she recommends it goes to finance, just so you know what that process looks like. That way, there's always a clear chain of why something was spent more than was anticipated. So, just as background.
All right. Meeting is adjourned.
No.
Thank you.
Howard.
Thank you. I got some checks. Thanks, Ellie. Glad you're
I'll bug him again.
part of us to look at